We acknowledge the Yagara and Ghana nations as traditional custodians of the land on which we work, live and learn, and their continuing connection with the land, waters and community. We pay our respects to them and their elders past and present.
All content related to this program is for general informational purposes only and contains stories and discussions around mental health that may be disturbing to some listeners. If you are concerned about yourself or someone you know, please seek professional individual advice and support. More details are contained in our show notes.
Thanks for your order, Indecisive. Just recapping, that's one super happy burger and a shake. Was that chicken or beef today?
Give me beef.
Would you like a double beef patty for an extra $1 today?
Yes, I would love a double beef patty, thanks.
How would you like your beef cooked? Rare, medium or well done?
Not a fan of blood on the plate. Just the medium too pink?
Maybe well done to be safe?
Yeah, well done.
Would you like any extra salads or cheese with your burger today?
American cheddar and a slice of beetroot on top of the normal salad.
Would you like your onion cooked or raw?
Raw?
Raw onion.
No. Cooked. Cooked.
Cooked onion and sauce?
Yes, please.
Now, what sauce would you like from our dozen special flavour selection?
12 sauces. What's the most popular?
I don't know, sorry. The sweet onion's always nice.
Oh, good. I'll go with tomato, thanks.
Okay, so that's one super happy beef burger, double patty, well done with cooked onion, beetroot, American cheddar and tomato sauce, and a shake. Did you want to add some fries for $1?
Fries? I think we're having roast tonight, but I do like my fries. Sure. Let's add the fries.
Small, medium or large?
Do you know how many potatoes there are in a large?
You want large?
No. I was just wondering if you knew how many potatoes were in a large, because I don't want to go over my potato quota for dinner tonight.
I don't know, sorry. Small, medium or large?
Okay, let's go with medium. I mean, small's gone in 2 bites, am I right?
That's one super happy beef burger, double patty, well done with cooked onion, beetroot, American cheddar and tomato sauce, add a shake and medium fries. Would you like your fries loaded?
Loaded fries? What are the options?
Cheesy bacon, chili cheese, buffalo chicken, barbecued pork or bolognese.
It's a lot of choice. We're having chicken tonight, so that's out. And bolognese will just be more beef, so I don't think I need any more meat.
So chili cheese?
But cheesy bacon is so nice.
Cheesy bacon loaded fries then?
Actually, make it chili cheese.
That's one medium chili cheese loaded fries. Do you like your chili mild, medium or hot?
I've got the shake, but I could go for some heat. Last time I did, though, I couldn't really taste anything because of the chili. Mild, thanks.
That's a super happy burger, double patty, well done with American cheddar, cooked onion and beetroot and tomato sauce, medium loaded fries with mild chili cheese and a shake. Was there anything else today?
What size shake did I order again?
That's a small chocolate shake.
Can I change that to a medium vanilla shake instead, please?
Would you like to load your vanilla shake?
We can load everything now, can't we? What can I load it with?
We've got M&M's, Oreos, Flake or Skittles.
How much extra does it cost?
No charge. It's special of the month.
Can I add more than one?
For an extra $1, you can add 2 or more.
Okay, I'm going to add M&M's and Skittles, thanks.
Okay, so that's a super happy burger, double patty, well done with American cheddar, cooked onion and beetroot and tomato sauce with medium loaded fries with mild chili cheese and medium vanilla loaded shake with M&M's and Skittles.
Hang on, I don't think Skittles are going to go with the M&M's. Can I change that to Oreos?
Yeah, sure.
Actually, can I have the Skittles on the side?
Instead of the Oreos?
No, if I can add 2 or more, let's go with the M&M's and Oreos in the shake and the Skittles on the side.
Right. So that's a super happy burger, double patty, well done with American cheddar, cooked onion and beetroot and tomato sauce with medium loaded fries with mild chili cheese and medium vanilla loaded shake with M&M's and Oreos and Skittles on the side. Is there anything else you'd like?
I think that's all, thanks.
That's $14.50, please. Will that be cash or card?
Do you take Diners card?
Sorry, no.
Seems odd since you're a restaurant.
These are all MasterCard, so paying by card today?
Hang on, I think I've got the cash. $14.50, yeah?
Yes, $14.50, please.
I've only got $14.40 in cash. Will you take that?
Sorry, we'll need the full $14.50, please.
Okay, I'll use my card then.
Thank you. Please tap or swipe when you're ready.
Hang on, can I pay $14.40 in cash and the last 10 cents on the card?
There's a minimum transaction fee of 50 cents for anything under $10. Is that okay?
What if I put 10 on the card and the balance in cash?
That's $4.50 balance. Tap or swipe when you're ready. Would you like a receipt?
Oh, no thanks. I mean, unless you can send it to my phone. I don't like wasting paper.
We don't have that option, I'm sorry.
Oh, paper it is then. Yes, please, I'll take the receipt. Can you also throw in some extra napkins?
I'll have what she's having.
Oh, don't get me started about toothpaste choice paralysis.
How is it that some decisions are so clear and easy to make when others are fraught with second guesses?
Let's get to the bottom of it, hey?
Because this is Reframe of Mind,
where we deep dive into discussions about mental health, joined by some of Australia's leading minds to expand our understanding of the world and ourselves.
because we don't exist in a vacuum and the way we talk about mental health shouldn't either. We're your hosts, Andy Leroy and Louise Poole.
And last time on Reframe of Mind, we spoke to New Zealand professional ultramarathon runner and endurance athlete Lisa Tamati, who made the biggest decision of her life when she dropped everything to nurse her mother back to full health in the face of a very discouraging diagnosis.
5 years ago, my mum had a massive aneurysm. So she was left at the age of 74, well, fighting for her life for starters. They didn't think she'd survive. When she did, she was in and out of coma for a number of weeks. And when she did survive and come out the other end of the coma, she had massive brain damage and hardly any higher function mentally. So she had no control over her body or anything. Now, I'm suddenly confronted, I've been up until that point, this, selfish, goal-orientated athlete. Mum was always supporting me and, looking out for me and helping me. I was running my businesses and so on, but I was very much I could do what I wanted. And then this situation happened and we were left, being told that she would never do anything again, that the brain damage was so massive she would never have any quality of life or do anything, and to put her in an institution. And I was just like, no, that's not happening. And so at that point I had to stop training and running, obviously, and doing the long stuff. I still looked after myself self-care wise, but I put all of my energies and focus into her rehabilitation. And even though I was told there was no hope and there is no way forward and just forget it, make it comfortable, I thought, well, I don't do comfortable for a start. And if that's the option, then I'd rather go down fighting if I'm going to go down.
Lisa told us that this experience changed her relationship with decision making.
It's just about listening to your intuition, which, I tend to believe now comes from somewhere else rather than just from our own mind, or sometimes at least, that, we can tap into a power, if you like, that can guide us. And I don't know that for a fact, but that's how I feel at the moment. So I'm trying to sit now, when I have a big decision to make, I'm trying to just sit with it and sort of see where my gut is telling me is the right direction to go. And, the gut being, whether it's my intuition or whether that's coming from a higher place, is helping me make better, good decisions. Like sometimes in the past where I've just gone against what my gut's telling me because I think this is a great idea. And then usually I fall on my face when I do that because there's something that I haven't picked up on.
Now, I'm glad that our listeners have made the decision to stick with us so far in the podcast, especially
Absolutely.
If they started at episode 1, because we're now at 25.
Woohoo! That's like a silver jubilee in Queen terms. Mind you, it would have to be 25 years. But anyway, and I'm glad as well that we made the decision to make this series because, that really was an easy one after all.
If only all decisions were that easy, hey?
I know, right? I mean, it's definitely been easier for me to decide to make a podcast than it ever will be to order Uber Eats because you know what it's like. I mean, you got to find the restaurant and then you got to negotiate with whoever you're having dinner with. Okay, let's have this and not this or something else. And then there's the delivery times. And then you got to pick the food and then you got to customize your sauce. And by the time you get to the payment, you look at it and you go, oh my God, is it really worth that delivery charge? Really?
How many times then do you just give up and not order?
You just close the app down and go, bugger it, I'm going to cook something myself. And then 30 minutes later, you haven't cooked something for yourself and you're hungrier.
And you're hangrier.
Yeah, I know. But then that brings into question then about the supermarket.
Oh,
so many options of toothpaste, Louise.
Oh my God. Oh. Don't get me started on the toothpaste. No, I think I'm going to get started on the toothpaste, right? You go to the toothpaste aisle. I don't know. I feel like in my utopian memory, nostalgic memory, it just used to be a tiny little section. And now it is almost a whole aisle of toothpaste. And, what do you pick? There's so many options with whitening, with bacterial control, with fresh breath, with charcoal, with advanced fresh breath, with advanced whitening, with tartar control, with mint stripe, with gum health, with advanced mint pro gum, total whiten charcoal extract, triple stripe enamel protection, complete defense sensitive freshness blast 3D. What do you choose?
I think you forgot the baking soda amongst all of that. And is that the one with 24-hour protection or 48?
Why can't they make them all in one? Just one toothpaste that does all those fucking things.
I mean, I remember the good old days when I was a kid and Dad used to work for Colgate Palmolive and just used to bring the toothpaste home before I even had to think about choosing. But these things take up half an aisle in the supermarket.
Yeah. I find, honestly, a supermarket really overwhelming sometimes.
Yeah. Especially when you're hungry.
Oh, definitely when I'm hungry.
You just want to buy everything.
And yet you still manage to come home with nothing.
I know, a trolley full of nothing.
Easily spend $100 when you're hungry. Nothing to eat.
Mm-hmm.
We really make a lot of decisions every day when you stop and think about it, it's overwhelming. Toothpaste and burgers alone, let alone the big stuff.
I know, right? And I suppose it kind of begs the question, what stops us from making some of those decisions? Is it fear of failure, or is it of making the wrong choice, or is it just not having collected enough data? And why are some decisions easier than others?
Oh, the toothpaste, right? Got plenty of data, but I could certainly be making the wrong choice. I mean, if I don't get the one with baking soda, the world might be over.
Time will tell. TikTok.
So we need some help working this out, and we've enlisted Scientia Professor Joe Forgas AM from the University of New South Wales, who is an expert on decision making.
Yeah, if you've ever picked up a psychology textbook, there's a good chance Joe Forgas wrote a chapter in it. Google Scholar says he's been cited 34,293 times. Massive. So you probably referenced him in your assignment as well at some point, and we've certainly given him plenty of footnotes in this series so far.
Yeah, Joe has published 27 books, over 200 articles and book chapters, so we asked him to introduce his own accolades.
I am Scientia Professor at the University of New South Wales. I am a well-published experimental cognitive social psychologist. I've got an Order of Australia for my efforts, and I don't know what else. I've got all sorts of prizes and stuff, but you may not want to list all of those.
No, but I'd like to see your trophy room. What's going on there?
I don't have a trophy room. I have a few things on my wall. I've got the Distinguished Scientific Contribution Award from the Australian Psychological Society, the Alexander von Humboldt Prize from Germany. I had a Rockefeller scholarship, stuff like that. But you don't want to know all that, really.
Your resume is much better than ours.
Well, it takes time, and I'm getting quite old.
And Joe told us about the nature of decision-making.
Not all decisions are the same. There are decisions where you have a fair amount of control, and there are decisions where a lot of the control is outside your power. And there are decisions which are rationally foreseeable. In other words, you can calculate the pluses and the minuses as best as you can. And many where you are dealing with intrinsic uncertainty. So there is no single good answer. I suppose the first step would be to try to analyze what sort of decision this is, how much of a control I have over this, how much information I have. The problem very often is when you're thinking about decisions for the future that we are not very good in knowing what would really make us happy. When you buy a car, how do you make a decision? How do you know whether having that particular gizmo is going to be more important to you than some other gizmo? You just don't know. And so very often you deal with a great deal of uncertainty. And when that is the case, that's also important in decisions. You have to recognize that there is nothing more you can do. So just choose one or the other and go with it.
We really just typically lazy as thinkers, as human beings, and just seek what serves our own beliefs. I'm just thinking specifically, again, around the topic of politics and leaders, and how they will often get up into the media with a brief statement of some sort, but their statement is completely incongruent with their actions, and yet people don't tend to look beyond the words they say.
Absolutely. I mean, Trump is a good example. I think people calculate that thousands or perhaps tens of thousands of untruths that he's spoken, but it didn't seem to bother anybody. So it's absolutely true. Another feature of human cognition is that we rely on shortcuts and heuristics almost all the time. Daniel Kahneman, who is a Nobel Prize-winning social psychologist, he got his Nobel Prize in economics by studying judgments and decision-making, has written an excellent book on thinking fast and slow. And he makes the point that thinking fast, jumping to conclusions, not evaluating the evidence, making mental shortcuts is the fallback technique for human thinking. So absolutely, the idea of rationally weighing up and examining the evidence requires extra motivation, extra effort, extra time. And so most of the time, most people aren't really doing that. It can be learned and it can be taught, but it's effortful, and we are essentially cognitively lazy.
See, this is why we started calling them Joe Bombs. Because he drops these home truths on us. I'm definitely feeling called out about being cognitively lazy. And he's right.
Yeah, it's a bit like a carpet bomb going off emotionally sometimes with Joe, but where do the toothpaste and the super happy burger with fries sit on the importance of decision making?
I think you'll find that's a super happy burger double patty, well done with American cheddar, cooked onion and beetroot tomato sauce, medium loaded fries with mild chili cheese, vanilla, medium loaded shake with M&Ms and Oreos and Skittles on the side, actually.
On the side. I'm surprised she didn't go with both of the other options on the side since she's paying the $1. But anyway, look, truth be told, we've probably created a lot of mental shortcuts around choices like those because carefully considering every decision is exhausting and it's overwhelming.
Yeah, and we didn't consciously create most of those shortcuts. So I wonder now where else we've built shortcuts into our thoughts and behaviours that we're not consciously aware of.
So can we talk about the I'm fucking done moment again?
Yes, the I can't do this anymore moment. The
This bra doesn't fit and I'm not going to wear it anymore moment.
Yeah, we discussed this a couple of episodes ago. It's when those circumstances or situations, feelings that you're living kind of reaches that tipping point where you have no choice but to choose to change. You're kind of forced into it to make an intentional decision because all those other times that we didn't actually make a decision was actually choosing not to make a decision, whether we wanted to admit that or not.
Yeah, and the IFD or I'm fucking done.
IFD.
IFD.
I love it. I love it. This is how we get the gen, what are the
hashtag IFD.
No, what's the new generation?
Oh, who the fuck knows? I think
Gen
they're coming thick and fast. No, I think they're up to Generation Alpha now.
No.
Well, they're the babies, I think, aren't they? I don't know.
This is how we get the TikTok kids
and then,
with the
like
IFDs.
Gen Y used to be Gen Y, but now they're millennials. They rebranded themselves because, of course, they did. But anyway.
Well, I'm a millennial.
I know.
By a year.
But you're going to take it.
I'm going to take it.
You're going to take it.
Millennials are old now, so it's not even cool anymore.
I'm Gen X and proud. Going to wear that with pride.
Gen X, IFD.
So that IFD feeling, it's actually born out of deciding to move away from something or run away from something rather than move towards it.
Yeah. Look, I've been thinking about this a lot lately because of those episodes a few weeks ago. Funny how that happens.
I'm having an episode. Oh, my God, I'm having an episode.
I'm having an episode and an episode.
Yeah.
But, it's really made me analyse a lot of those past experiences because I always thought that I found it easy to make those big life decisions. I've moved to heaps of different places. Should we do the list?
Come on.
Okay.
Let's be like Lucky Star and list all the cities Louise has been to.
I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere.
Yeah. You've breathed the desert air, man?
Yeah, I did actually. I did breathe what's the Northern Territory desert? The one that goes.
Geography's never been my strong point.
There's a desert though. There's the desert in the middle.
Let's just call it the dirty desert.
I've breathed the dirty desert air, man. Okay. I've been to Brisbane, Wagga Wagga, Ballarat, Canberra.
You don't have to sing, please don't.
Inverell, Newcastle, Muswellbrook, Darwin, Ipswich and Brisbane. I've been everywhere.
You've lived everywhere.
I've lived everywhere.
You've taken your suitcase, you've taken your clothes, you've taken your furniture, you've taken your cats.
The Gen
everywhere.
The Gen Zers aren't going to get that song reference either, so
they're not.
Nah.
Sorry, Gen Z. We just lost a whole. That's how you cut off an audience.
Gone. Point is, not that I can't sing. It's that those big decisions of moving, my life from one city to another for jobs, they felt easy. They felt like I was making a gut decision that actually the feeling that I had was this overwhelming, this is what I have to do, like real clear moment of clarity to make that big decision. Spent very little time thinking of the consequences.
Such as? What are the consequences, Louise, of packing up your whole life constantly and moving interstate?
Money and lack of support, lack of friends, loneliness, isolation. Money, again, it is expensive to move, even if you're going 3 streets down the road.
It is. Yeah, it is. You're running into thousands automatically. But you always kind of had the sense that things would work out, yeah?
Oh, I thought I did. Except now that I'm looking at my past experiences through this new lens, I'm wondering if maybe I made decisions quicker without thinking about them very much.
Close your eyes, plug your ears and go on, yeah, move.
And maybe if I actually was running away from things instead of running to things.
Oh, I see. Is this like all just couch time? Do I need to pull out my my notebook and pen.
I hope you take the Medicare rebate. I've got no money after moving that many cities.
Look, I can certainly take your Medicare card, but I can't promise a rebate.
Yeah, so I think those big decisions sometimes felt really easy and quick because I just went, yep, fuck it, big thing, done. The flip side is like other decisions have really been paralysing, particularly the emotional ones, hanging on to relationships, friendships longer than I should have. I feel like I've allowed myself to be taken advantage of by people and situations because maybe I haven't been able to make a decision to stop it.
Yeah, right.
Okay. Like sunk cost phallus from last episode.
Sunk cost phallus, yes. We come up with all of the shiny new terms so you don't have to.
I tell you, that's going to catch on with Gen Z. We might have lost with Lucky Star, but we'll get them back with sunk cost phallus. It's okay.
The old SCP.
SCP. So it's weird that those big decisions felt easy and expansive, but the ones that were around emotions that were probably more important for me to make, they led to paralysis.
Almost like being in the aisle of the supermarket with the toothpaste again.
Oh, not the toothpaste again.
So I guess something that you've been working on, though, in our journey with this podcast as well is untangling your personal identity from your professional one. So how does conscious decision-making play into that, do you think?
Well, this is the first time I've lived in a city. Actually, the first time I've stayed in a city after I've left a job. Normally, for 20 years of my media life, when I've left a job, I've left the city as well.
Packed the whole thing up and gone.
Yeah. So so it's not just change a job. It's just rip my whole life, burn it all down, start again.
Chuck it onto the gypsy cart and move on.
Yeah. So it's actually been really tough to make those conscious decisions that actually separate my identity as a person from my identity as an employee, from as a job, as a career.
They've all been so closely linked, I suppose, hey?
Like, have I just been on autopilot my whole life?
Well, I don't know. I think, as we've mentioned briefly so far, we do kind of start to make decisions automatically, but it's interesting that you say that, things have kind of compacted along the way so that you talk about untangling the parts of yourself that are professional from the parts that are personal now. And for the longest time, that was all bundled up together, wasn't it? Because your social life was an extension of your career.
I just realised something. Joe Forgas is going to be proud. All those.
Yeah, go on.
I made all those shortcuts.
Yeah.
Between all those things unconsciously, maybe to make things easier for me. Setting up a system where, if I leave a job, then I leave my entire world behind and don't ever have to address anything around anything personal or something like that. It's just it's a shortcut to coping.
Well, it is. I suppose if your contractual arrangements included you'll have a boyfriend for the duration of your stay in this city, of which you'll forfeit when you move away, then that would have been a very handy shortcut to make.
Okay, well, that was never in the contract.
It's never that tidy though, is it?
No. Relationships though. Mm-hmm. Let's talk relationships.
Okay. My line's open.
What about you, Dr. Love? How many relationships have you held on to for the fear of making a decision?
Have I told you about my family?
Many, many times throughout the podcast.
Well, you know what? Decisions that I've made when I was younger in life tended to be focused a lot around my relationship to my family and what's the word that we use? Honouring your father and your mother and that kind of stuff, like my...
Oh, your tree. This is your tree analogy, isn't it?
Not really, no.
Oh, it's not your...
No.
It's not your
it's more about
family of orientation tree analogy?
No. It's about loyalty. So what I kind of felt at the time was a sign of loyalty and doing the right things. So when I was moving to Canberra to study, when I was about 19, I think I was, might have been older actually. Anyway, whatever I was, I remember my grandmother saying to me, "You won't go." I said, "Yeah, I will." He said, "No, you won't leave your mother." So that kind of put into me the Daphne Capita's attitude of, well, I'll show you. Anyone who hasn't met Daphne, listen to episode 4.
It's the PTW, prove them wrong attitude.
The prove them wrong attitude. We're going to have to, we've got a whole glossary of acronyms that we need to actually put up, I think, by the end of this. But yeah, there was that. So, but then, by the time I was making the decision about Darwin, I'd kind of got to that point again where I'd stuck around so much because, I'd been in a relationship until about a year or two before that, or actually longer actually. It broke up well before that, but I'd been in a relationship, so that I used to limit myself forever considering moving away for a job. I also had that very strong link with my parents and my family, and also kind of thought, well, if I move away, I'm going to lose all that. When the decision came to go to Darwin, I thought, okay, well, this is going to have an impact, but I've really got to think about what I need to do long term for myself. And yep, I'll be leaving these people in situ where they're living, where I've grown up and that sort of thing. But I need to actually do this for myself. And that's kind of where I started to kind of think a bit more independently for myself. I think at that late age, I thought, well, actually, I've got to actually start to think about what I need as well, not just living my life for everybody else.
It's really interesting that the phrase you used in there, which is I was using those relationships to limit myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's actually a term that I came to understand and didn't come to necessarily organically, like it's something that, like a concept that I actually came across years back, that I'm the one that places these limitations there for myself. I don't want to go into any kind of territory of victim blaming or shaming or anything like that, because there are a whole heap of things that we decide to do or not that aren't directly that, if that makes sense. But, things like I'll never have these relationships again if I move away. Well, that's just silly. It's clearly possible for people to maintain relationships across distances. It's clearly possible for people to visit each other interstate. Growing up, I used to have friends who had family interstate, and they'd go off on holidays and visit family and all that kind of stuff, and it was never an issue. So why should it be an issue for me?
Yeah.
And yet I continued to use that as an excuse not to go out and do those things for myself.
I think I've replicated that as well. I've stayed in unhealthy relationships because I feel like I had to, that was the only choice I could do. That was the only choice I had, he'll do. If not this one, it's going to be another one just like this one. So I just might as well make this one work, because there's always going to be something I don't like. Maybe just if I invest more time and more energy into this one, then this one will work. SCP, sunk cost fallacy.
There you go. Ka-ching.
I do also wonder, is it that I've actually been in love with them for who they are, or if it's been for who I thought they could be?
Yeah, so waiting to hit that IFC moment, I just fucking can't. What's that about? Are we trying to collect so much data and unhappiness that eventually we overwhelm ourselves and shut down? Or is it because the decision does become easier when one of the options is abhorrent?
Or is it a case that the bigger the emotion is, the harder the decision is?
Well, Scientia Professor Joe Forgas AM tells us that there is a correlation between mood and decisions.
It very much depends on the decision that you need to make. The way mood states operate is essentially as a kind of evolutionary subconscious signal that tells us how to cope or how to respond to a given situation. So to put it very simply, if you happen to be in a positive mood, then subconsciously what's that signaling to your information processing system is that you are in a safe situation, it's familiar, you can rely on what you've always done, you don't need to pay too much attention. And so you tend to make shortcuts, simplified decisions. And sometimes these are incorrect decisions. The negative mood is a kind of subconscious signal that says, look out, it's not really what you expect. There is something new here, pay attention. And so people in a negative mood tend to think more slowly, more carefully, more attentively. And in situations where the shortcut would be the wrong decision, they make the right decision. Some experiments we have done, for example, it looks at person perception. How do we form impressions of people? Person perception is subject to many biases. Most of the time, we take one look and we know what this person is like. It's a primacy effect. The first information dominates and you don't care to look any further. And we have found in a bunch of experiments that if you put people into a positive mood, they're even more likely to rely on first impressions. If you put them into a negative mood and you ask them to perform the same task, they are going to be much more accurate because they look more carefully. So some of these shortcuts and heuristics can be reduced by negative mood. And in those situations, negative mood produces a better outcome. Other experiments, for example, people are better at detecting deception when they're slightly in a sad mood. Their eyewitness memories are more accurate when they are in a negative mood. So in lots of kind of surprising ways, negative mood does improve processing when careful attention is needed. But positive mood might improve processing when you need to be creative, when you don't have to pay too much attention to what's going on, when you have to rely on what you already know. So it kind of depends on the demands of the situation.
So it almost sounds like you're saying if we need to make a major decision that's going to have a big impact on us, we should probably watch 3 hours of news services and get angry first.
The problem with that is that we're not very good in self-manipulating mood. If we were, nobody would ever get depressed. So, what we show is a process, but it's not easily open to conscious manipulation, unfortunately. Otherwise, a lot of psychologists would be out of business.
We'd live in a perfect world.
Well, if we didn't have to be depressed, if it was easy to control our moods and our feelings, then, we wouldn't need psychologists, would we?
If negative emotion helps us with negative skepticism, then if we feel bad about negative emotions when we experience them, but they're actually quite a positive tool to have in our kit.
Absolutely. And I think that's a very, very important message. We live in a society where we have a cult of hedonism. Everybody wants to be happy all the time. If you go to a bookshop, you see shelves and shelves of how to be happy. And we do not recognize that some periods of sadness or negative mood are perfectly normal, perfectly natural, and oftentimes even useful. If you think about, again, human history, in the last 2,000 years, most of the great artistic creations of Western civilization had to do with tragedy, sadness, problems. In other historical periods, people thought it's important to manage and relive and experience negative affect because it's instructional. And in a way, we are quite unique in our current modern cultural environment to think that only happiness will do. Anything that's less than happiness is unacceptable. I think we all could be a lot happier if we realize that sadness is an inevitable, essential, and oftentimes useful and adaptive part of the human emotional repertoire. It's part of it.
One of the things that I've been working on with my own psychologist is that when I feel a negative emotion, let's say it's sadness, that's not something that is easy for me to let pass, because it's not the sadness that is the problem. It's then my judgment and self-criticism and anger that I've felt sad that I've let myself feel that way. Now I have the Scientia professor on the
Don't worry about it.
I'm just saying, a few more degrees on the wall than my psychologist, but that's normal, right, though, isn't it? So we shouldn't.
Look, it depends on the duration and the intensity. Obviously, enduring negative emotion is debilitating and needs to be dealt with and requires help. All I'm saying is that temporary and manageable negative emotion is, in a way, part of life. And by the way, most psychotherapy essentially tells you the same thing. Don't worry about it. You have to learn tactics of telling yourself how you don't need to worry about it. What you cannot control, what you cannot help, there is only one solution: to learn to ignore it or not worry about it. But basically, expecting to be happy all the time is impossible. Logically, psychologically, culturally, happiness would have no meaning if you had no sadness.
Okay, so I'm rolling up my sleeves because this is going to sound like a bit of a cliche.
Does it have an acronym?
We'll work on an acronym.
Okay.
But it's often said, and I can attest to its truthfulness, that when we're faced with our own mortality, we really start to question where we sit in the world.
Yeah.
I've lost both my parents now, and for me, there's been nothing more eye-opening than to really get a sense of my place in the family. You know, we spoke earlier in the series, and if you haven't cut it out, that reference that you were making about my family of origin and my family of...
Well, now I can't cut it out, can I?
my family of orientation and my family of origin.
I think it was the family of procreation.
Procreation, sorry. Family of orientation and family of procreation. And how much of that was just based on that comfy feeling of knowing your place. You know what I mean? Like, it's so simple just to turn up to events and know, okay, well, this is what I've got to do. This is what I'll put up with, and we'll be out of here in 2 hours. So there we go.
Like a routine, even if you don't like it.
Oh my God, yeah. But what if that place doesn't really allow or afford you the space to articulate what you feel or what you need? What if every time you try to talk about something, you're just cast as being the dramatic one or the selfish one, or especially if you get to the point where you have the IFD moment and then you get your stick and you chuck it in the cog of the machine.
YOLO.
That's one of my analogies, YOLO. And everything just kind of comes to a halt because you fucking stopped it.
So that stopping of functioning, is that what happened when your mum died?
I think I started to kind of find some sticks that didn't quite work.
Okay.
That didn't quite stop the machine, but I've fucking stopped it now. But anyway.
WWSD, what would sticks do?
What would sticks do? They initially break and they kind of slow us down more than the process itself sometimes. But, I can't confirm one way or the other than my personal response at the time. But when Mum passed away, for example, I really felt there was a bit of an expectation that I'd move back to Sydney and look after Dad, rather than continue on this new folly of this newly forged career path that I'd just started 9 months earlier. Mum died 9 months after I moved to Darwin. After a lifetime of stopping myself going, because, what if something happens to Mum and Dad? Anyway, yeah, but I started my radio career. So kind of felt there was an expectation that, okay, well, it's so new and you probably could give that up and go back to it later if you wanted to. Or also I was in a new relationship. It kind of didn't feel like that was being held in very high regard at the time either. So at the time I made the bold move and I said, I'm staying in Adelaide and I'll do whatever I possibly can by way of support from interstate, but I'm staying here. This is where I live. So that was my first stick. And I thought that it kind of felt good asserting for myself what I needed within that too. Like I loved my dad. I would have done anything for him, but I wouldn't do that. Like,
that was a Meatloaf song.
That was a Meatloaf song. Yeah. I think in lots of ways too, had I moved back there at that time to look after him, he wouldn't have had probably as long a life. I wouldn't have killed him, but he certainly wouldn't have been happy and I wouldn't have been happy. And I don't think things would have been great for either of us. Like I could have been in a much worse mental state.
Yeah, and it gave him the chance to find that independence and to find things that he liked on his own.
Totally.
Outside of a relationship that he'd been in for decades too. So
yeah, we were both grown men. We didn't want to be in each other's space or anything like that. I made a stack of trips to Sydney in between to stay with Dad after he'd been in hospital, for example. But then I noticed something else start to crop up. It was this patronising statement of, Andrew wants to be helpful. That'll crop up.
Oh, well, if they're using your full name, it's never good.
Well, I know, right? But they always do because they don't really know me as Andy. I'm Andrew to the family. It'll crop up whenever the idea of me having any kind of input was involved, like I was doing it for me and not for Dad. So when Dad passed away, those patterns really seemed to niggle even more at me. They were glaring even brighter. So I had to make a choice for myself to back away from family relationships.
You made a decision.
I made a decision.
A conscious decision.
Well, it wasn't without its stresses. And I suppose the important thing to note here is that I never ever made a decision I'm done forever with this mob because they're my family. It also was definitely one of I'm absolutely done with relating like this.
IFD.
I'm IFD with the way that we're relating years. So
all that relating with, that was all shortcuts too though, wasn't it?
Oh, it was all stuff that had been done over years, like it had built up over years and this was just the way we did it. This is my place in the pecking order. This is what was expected of me. This is what we do. They do this, you do that. And that's the end of the story. So that wasn't any good for me anymore. It wasn't any good for me then.
It's not good for anybody.
No, exactly. Really, I had to make that decision to back right away to protect myself from falling back into those unconscious habits of communication. I had to stop relying on those shortcuts or lazy thinking, as Joe Forgas kindly calls it.
Lazy cognitive decision making.
Lazy cognitive decision making.
But when he says it sounds so much more intelligent.
I think it's his accent.
Yeah, it is.
Really like his accent. Yeah. Anyway, I had to start the hard work then of asking myself, what do I really want and what does that mean? Because when you put the stick in the machine and you stop it, well, then you've got to choose consciously. You can't go on expecting the machine to tick along like it has for everything to be better.
No, well, you broke the spokey dokes.
Yeah, exactly. I broke the spokey dokies.
And did you have the helmet on as you went flying over the handlebars?
Oh, sometimes it feels like I didn't, but sure. My streamers on the handlebars, on the other hand, probably haven't come through so nicely, but I can get new ones. That's the whole point. Like in the short term, it meant taking the oxygen out of any potential to be spoken down to or disrespected. And as Joe said to us before, just because I can't hear that anymore doesn't stop them from thinking it or even potentially saying it to others, but it's not my job to change anyone else. I need to focus on making whatever interactions I have helpful for me instead of limiting my own potential.
So then the last 12 months or so, the span of us recording the interviews for this podcast and the journey of us starting our business and the journey of you personally in that time of making conscious decisions to put yourself first, how does that play out?
Look, I think, to some extent I've had to compartmentalize some of that, but also I think the decisions I've been making on that bigger family level have also helped me to make better decisions in other areas too.
Do you mean it's all related?
It could be. It could be.
Do you mean that we don't exist in a vacuum?
It could be. And when you've emptied that vacuum cleaner bag, don't be surprised if some more fills up.
There's plenty more dust bunnies out there.
Oh, there's plenty more. The major decisions have been at play this year, but they've all been while I've been maintaining a distance from that relative, for example, who scorned me, who basically said some nasty things, unforgivable things, really.
Yeah.
And
we're making light, but the scorning was scornful.
Yeah, it was pretty shitful.
And hell hath no fury, like that of an Andrew scorned.
Correct. And I've had plenty of study being stubborn as well, but it's not about stubbornness. It's about not taking shit. And I've also, apart from that relative, kept a bit more of a distance from other family members as well, because I've had to look at myself and my own behaviors in all of that and looking at, how I do sometimes demonstrate behaviors that I don't admire in others. And they just come to the fore when interacting with the family sometimes, because that's what we've always done. And sometimes I don't treat myself well in that either. So, I become a different person when I'm around them, and I would rather just be myself.
Yeah.
But you know what? When I be myself, often I feel like I'm being judged, and then I judge myself as not being good enough. So the validation that I used to get from family was from people who aren't here anymore. They're gone. They're dead.
Yeah.
Whilst validating others in my family for their achievements, I've generally found very little admiration or respect in return, and that they in fact do what they accuse me of, which is making the subject always about them. So my decision on that score has been to maintain a distance so I can work out how I can best support myself in being me and liking me and building more people around me that like me for who I am before letting any of the others back in, potentially throwing that balance off course.
Yeah, you've kind of got to get your own boat floating before you can take on any passengers.
I mean, I've got plenty of buckets to pail out the shit, but I don't want to be kind of getting water in that boat before I need to. And also in that time as well, because I'm working out who I am, I'm actually working out a lot more confidently how I can actually respond to some of those potential speed humps or sticks that are thrown back in my direction. By not making a decision at this stage to let that particular person back into my life, I'm giving myself space. I'm not shutting them out completely forever. I'm not allowing myself to be intimidated or bullied into acquiescence. And I'm certainly not looking at ways that I can hold myself personally responsible and shoulder the full responsibility either, because that would just be returning to business as usual. And I've rejected that, That's done, that business is done, shop's closed.
The stuff about family dynamics that you talk about, it's so relatable. And I've definitely had my place as being somebody who, when they were younger, felt like the loudest people were the ones that got to have a say, and I had to keep it within because that was how to survive. That was I suppose that's the shortcut to being able to deal with the situation, because the confrontation wasn't necessarily great.
Yeah, it's much easier to shut up and just take whatever they say than try and have a say and be shot down in flames.
I know you love analogies, Andy.
I do.
The squeaky wheel gets the grease.
Absolutely. And boy, have we gone through some grease.
The squeaky wheel also apparently gets the stick thrown in it too. The spokey dokes.
Well, the squeaky wheel is the one that's had the stick in it and throws the stick back.
And then it gets on Facebook and leaves a passive-aggressive rant from it leaves a passive-aggressive squeak all over the internet.
It gets its axle to send some cutlery through the post.
Reference to an older episode.
So that squeaky wheel, that one that is always speaking out and getting all the attention because it needs the attention, and then says, don't you speak because you're just looking for attention. I'm the one that needs the attention. The loudest voice does influence our thinking, especially when we're actually making decisions unconsciously, as Joe Forgas points out.
Something you mentioned before reminded me of another one of the papers I read before. Highly visible people appear more important. So when you've got these voices shouting loudly on social media, or I suppose the Trumps and stuff of the world, why is it if you make the most noise, then you look like you're the voice to be believed?
Basically, this is called a halo effect in social psychology. The idea is if somebody has some highly visible feature, then that will trump everything else. Not Trump,
yeah.
but Trump. Verb Trump. And again, this has a deep evolutionary function. If you imagine yourself in a Stone Age environment, then paying attention to whatever is most visible is a good strategy. You don't pay equal attention to everything. You pay attention which is most salient, most visible. And so that's how the human mind works. That had an adaptive function for 200,000 years. It nowadays often leads to mistaken judgments because we mistake people who are highly visible. I mean, take a very interesting example. People often ask pop singers or celebrities or sportsmen about their opinions on issues in which they are totally idiotic. They're not entitled to comment on. Why would you want to know why, what's the name of that woman? Hilton.
Oh, Paris Hilton, yeah.
Yeah. Why do you want to know what Paris Hilton thinks about anything? And the answer is because she's highly visible. So we have this idea that if somebody is highly visible, they must know something about everything. Or why do we ask a pop singer 10 minutes after arriving in a country, well, how do you like Australia? Why would you want to know? He doesn't know, you don't know, and they're not qualified to comment. So essentially, if you look at the pages of, the more popular media, it's full of people being asked to comment on stuff about which they know nothing because they are famous in some other dimension.
Is there an element within that as humans we want to actually believe that we can reach the heights of those people and find some sense of normality or some comparative normality between, let's say, for example, people who, follow the royal family or follow Hollywood celebrities, that in seeking out behaviors or responses that are similar to their own makes them feel like they can also get to that?
Yeah, that's another mechanism. It's a kind of identification, mimicking mechanism. And that again is an evolutionary pattern. If you see somebody successful or visible, then mimicking, copying their behavior is a natural adaptive response. So yes, we do. Even though in this highly individualistic society, this doesn't really work because the people you look up to are not actually part of your tribe. Who knows what they are. So mimicking them is not necessarily a good strategy, but it's another example of what you might call an evolutionary vulnerability. We bring with us all kinds of baggage from Stone Age hunter-gatherer days, which still function the same way, but in an environment which is totally different. Many other examples of that. Obesity is an evolutionary vulnerability. In a Stone Age environment, eating as much as you can is a really smart thing to do because you don't know when you can eat again. When you are living in a society of plenty, we still have this tendency to eat as much as we can do, and it's actually killing us. There are many of these built-in programs which are now producing dysfunctional consequences.
Would you say that fake it till you make it is not true at all then, if mimicry doesn't work like that?
I would think that in a reasonably well-functioning society, fake it till you make it should not work because as long as people are fairly rational and reasonable, you get to be found out.
So decision-making processes being evolutionary speaks to nature, but I suppose what about the nurture side of it all? Those formative experiences that we have that impact our ability to make decisions as we grow up. If we haven't had somebody nurture us into believing that we are capable of making healthy, good, solid decisions for ourselves, that we have the power to do that, do we grow up not believing that?
Yeah, well, cognitive neuropsychologist at the Brain and Mind Centre at the University of Sydney, Mirren Irish, tells us about the importance of formative experiences.
This is when most people traditionally would have been doing those kind of formative first experiences. So you would maybe have your, doing your big exams, getting your first car, first job, maybe meeting your partner, first date, all this kind of thing, getting married, first child. So that tended to produce this sort of cluster of really memorable and sort of self-referential events that define the person. And so most people would retrieve from that time period.
So, Andy, in mentioning that you're clearing some space around yourself to make better decisions, it's like you're making a more supportive network for yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, one that's more meaningful for you. Probably comes with a sense of balance.
Yes. And Joe Forgas describes this as the emotional midpoints.
People who do research on this suggest that each of us has a kind of middle point, the average of our affective state, and there is a fluctuation around it that goes up and down, up and down. And this average point is not easily changed. All day, if you think about what happened to you since you got up this morning, you are on a roller coaster of different moods and emotional states. I mean, everything that happens to you, everything you see, everything you do has an emotional undercurrent. It's always there. And many of the times that undercurrent is actually useful. It's almost like you tuning a machine to work at optimum speed. If you're in a good mood, you become a little bit lazy. When you're in a bad mood, you become a little bit more attentive. It's like something that manages how you respond to situations. And you could almost say that the way the brain works is anticipating, trying to extrapolate from what is now to what is going to be next. And emotions and moods have a critical role in tuning that expectation.
Another of the guests we've spoken to during the series, Tisha Rose, author of Life Interrupted and Person Living with MS, and her coaching is based on her first-hand experience of the stress and anxiety that's caused by life-changing decisions. She talked to us about the important role intuition plays in her decision-making process.
You have to block out negative comments. You have to have a real inner confidence that the decisions you make are right for your journey. And for me, I kept thinking, have your opinion, but at the end of the day, you're not going to be in hospital bed or sitting in the wheelchair with me, unable to move. And sometimes I have made decisions which people I know give you funny looks. Even leaving Telstra, I was on a really good income. There was great supports there. And I left that to travel overseas by myself, So I was told by a financial advisor that was a stupid move. Telstra paid a great pension. And I was like, well, I'm in my mid-20s. All my friends are traveling. I want to travel. I can, I'm up and walking now. I want to get out of here and keep going. So I was confident that was the right decision for me, and it was the best decision I've ever made. You become more optimistic when you become more open to the possibility of change as well. And you all of a sudden think, I could be doing that. And that's what happened when I travelled. My neurologist used to laugh and say, well, where are we off to this time? Because when I was really sick in 2001, I ended up travelling overseas by myself. And that was calculated to do it by myself because I realised how scared I was about being alone in hospital. And not saying I had incredibly supportive family and friends, but that's the realisation that at night you are alone and you have to dig deep and you have to find something within yourself. So I wanted that experience of travelling overseas by myself and knowing I can get through challenges. And then in 2003, again, I was really, really sick. This time I was in hospital, back in a wheelchair. This time I couldn't use my arms very well. And my doctor said, well, where are you off to this time? And I sort of set myself a goal. And that's when I went to Romania in 2004, just to experience a totally different culture and to put, again, my illness in perspective.
So what is the difference between intuitive and scientific decision-making? Joe Forgas has something to say about this, as you might expect, and how the louder voices can influence our thinking.
How many other cliches can we bust with you?
I don't know. I mean, I don't necessarily want to bust cliches.
Started life as a demotivational speaker, Joe.
Well, look, we teach this in the first or second lecture in social psychology, the difference between intuitive knowledge and scientific knowledge. Intuitive knowledge is cliches and proverbs. And when you start thinking about proverbs, what you realize that for every proverb, there is an opposite proverb telling exactly the opposite. So by definition, proverbs are not true because the opposite is equally true. And yet,
sounds very Newtonian. For every force is an equal and opposite.
Well, it's a comment on the human mind that we like to summarize intuitive wisdom into short little statements, and we do not realize that if we looked further, we would find exactly the opposite occurs just as often. So the difference between scientific thinking and intuitive thinking is that intuitive thinking is based on shortcut simplifications, categorization. Scientific knowledge has to take into account the whole spread of relevant information. And so essentially none of the proverbs are true because the opposite of them occurs as well. And none of the cliches are true because if you stop and think another moment, you realize the opposite is true. Faking till you make it, yes, sometimes. Other times, faking till you get caught. It's just as true.
It's funny, when Andy and I were looking at putting this series together, we were looking for people to talk to who could, I suppose, give us tools, give us actual information of how to reshape ideas, give us new perceptions in it. And in that, we've also come across a lot of people who would call themselves motivational speakers, and really everything in their philosophy boils down to a tiny short phrase that I suppose now that you've educated us about it is just a shortcut in thinking. And there's that's not helpful, is it? That's not actually helpful to anybody.
Well, it hasn't been very helpful to me since I'm more often not happy than happy. But then I guess if you want to cope in life, you still have to use the best tools available to you. And that is still rational, scientific, reasonable thinking. I'm not sure what I can say about motivational speakers. I mean, typically what they do is they want to boost your self-confidence. They want to give you a positive outlook. And I'm sure that is working for some people. If you don't even try to get something done, then you have to work up enough self-confidence to have a go. And that's definitely the right thing to do. But after you've done that, you still have to think rationally and carefully about how you want to go about it.
You've given us so many things to think about today. I don't even know how to begin to apply some of these things in real life.
Well, it wasn't kind of formulated with the idea of application,
Well, I think if anything, the one thing you've highlighted is that nothing is certain, that within everything that's presented to us, it's valuable to question that and to find our own space within that to do what we feel is best for us in that moment.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose the ultimate message might be that being individual or trying to be an individual is difficult, tiresome, painful, but it's still the best way to go if you want to live in a reasonable society and if you want to make relatively better decisions other than abandoning yourself to the truth of a tribe you choose to belong to, taking your decisions ready-made for you by a leader or by the particular group you identify with.
Lots of things to think about, like let's not forget values as well. That's something that...
I remember those.
It's a few episodes ago now where we worked out our personal values thanks to a good conversation we had with best-selling Australian small business author Andrew Griffiths.
Yeah, he really spoke about the importance of knowing your values, and he went even further to say how his values impact on the decisions that he makes.
I think having a really clear value set, I know what my values are, I know what I will do and I won't do, and I'm really clear on my own integrity. And, that's sometimes hard for other people because they say, man, you're hard to be with because, your expectations are so high of how people should act. And that's, I'm toughest on myself for that. I have a really high value set and I don't really know where that came from. I think it was from seeing the opposite of that in life. Yeah. At an early age, I think I don't want to be that guy that beats up women. I don't want to be that guy that steals stuff. I don't want to be that guy that smokes heroin, steals cars. Like the path that I was going on, I guess I decided I wanted to be the opposite of all of those things that I actually hated and rejected. So I think having that clarity of value was really helpful for me. I think the second part of that, though, is when I was that age, when I was 17 or 18, I think, I looked at life as everything was so black and white. And in the middle was this tiny little grey area. It's either right or wrong, and then there's this little kind of grey area. What I realise now at 55 is there's this giant grey area and a little bit of black and a little bit of white on either end. And I think that has probably, as much as I hold myself to a really high value set, I really appreciate and respect and understand how other people are and being okay and knowing that it's, just because I'm like that doesn't mean everyone is like that or I should expect that of everyone else. So I've learned to be a lot more understanding and accommodating and realizing that the black and white absolutes don't translate a lot when you are thinking about how others are. And, like this whole thing we're going through at the moment, you're either, a tin hat foil wearer or not. I'm going to dislike that person now. I might have known him for 20 years, but because I disagree with him about vaccine, they're not going to be my friend anymore. I go, I don't want to be like that. I just want to go back to that stage of being able to still love someone and be able to disagree with them, or disagree with them and still love them. So yeah, I guess over the years, this constant mission to just become a better version of myself. It's a bit of a cliched answer, but it's really true. Every Friday morning, 10 o'clock, I ask myself a simple question. How am I better as a man this week than I was last week? And some weeks I am, and some weeks I'm probably not, but I want to ask myself, and I ask myself, how is my business better this week than it was last week? That constant effort to try and be that better version of myself. It's only a competition I'm having with myself. There's no one else involved in it. It's just me that I'm trying to be that better version of myself.
Okay, so we've been talking a fair bit about making an active decision here, says the cognitively lazy Louise. But what about when you don't make a decision? Because making no decision is also making a decision.
Well, yeah, it is. We don't want to open up a channel for victim blaming here or victim shaming, which is something that can very easily be taken down that path and misconstrued by what I'm about to say. But staying in an unhealthy relationship is also a decision.
Yeah, absolutely. I can attest to this from personal experience. It's like deciding to diminish yourself because of the consequences that you perceive might eventuate. Sometimes those threats are really real, really in real life dangerous.
Sometimes people are at risk. Definitely, that goes without saying.
Yeah. But for this example, what if it's more perceived risk? I describe indecision as the frog in the boiling pot. Yep. And not just because I know how much you love analogies, and you did say to me last episode that we haven't used many analogies lately. So I've actually been, I don't know if you've noticed, but I've been trying very heavily this episode to throw in some more analogies for you.
Thank you. I do appreciate it. Yeah. You'll get up to my spooky dokie limit anytime soon.
So the frog in the boiling pot, it's like you keep getting presented with the series of things that they just keep chipping away, where you decide to live with more and more discomfort and you give up the things that are good for you. Suddenly you're in a boiling pot of water.
Knee deep, you might say.
Because all those knee deep.
Knee deep.
Oh my God. That was riveting.
Read it. I think I've hit dad joke quota because I'm not even a dad, so...
No.
My two cats would disagree.
Cat dad quota.
I've hit my cat dad quota.
So you're in a boiling pot of water.
Yep.
And all those small decisions have set you on fire with anxiety and depression. You get forced into a decision because if you don't get out soon, you'll boil alive.
Ouch.
Yeah. And you made fun of that poor frog. How do you feel now that the frog boiled alive? You better feel bad.
Feeling like he probably wouldn't even be tasty because his boil's not baked.
Do they bake frog's legs?
I think they might. I don't know.
You're not a connoisseur of the
French cuisine, but look, we can research it and put it in the show notes.
Or we can just not.
Or not.
The thing is, though, those small decisions, they add up to a big decision, which means eventually you can't stand the heat anymore. You got to get out of the kitchen and you have to decide how many times do you compromise yourself at work, for example, before you finally say, IFD, I've had enough.
Enough already. Man, can I
say that, in the 10 years between Mum and Dad's deaths, there were lots of small cuts over those 10 years.
Death by 1,000 cuts.
Death by 1,000 cuts, like the sibling rivalry and the bickering, that all continued. At one point saw myself falling into Mum's role that she'd left behind when she died. She used to be the one who just wanted to keep the peace, just would kind of let anything go and play whatever role she needed to, just so that people didn't fight, just to be agreeable. And for my dad's sake, I was doing it. In this case, what I didn't expect, though, was for those relatives to join powers into one superpower after Dad's death. And essentially, I was left feeling like that I was being pushed out of the picture, or I was being included in decision-making because it was duty rather than a genuine effort to include me, because after all, I just wanted to be helpful, right? So all of that on top of the actual death of my father gave me the overwhelming feeling of, I'm fucking done. I just need to get out of here.
IFD.
I'm fucking done.
Work and identity. So I think it was about 3 or 4 years before I actually finished up my job on Brisbane radio that I wanted to leave. But I wasn't ready.
That's a long time.
It's a long time.
Whoa.
I remember we had contract renewals, not the last one, which didn't go great, but the one before that. I think it was a 2-year renewal, and I didn't want to do it. I was so unhappy at, I think, so many things, but I didn't feel like I could make a choice. I didn't feel like I could leave that part of my identity behind. And I remember the day that I signed that renewal, I just went home and, cried and didn't feel like getting out of bed because I knew that I'd committed another 2 years to this.
Contract renewals normally offer a sense of joy, I would think. Not tears of joy, obviously.
Yeah, I mean...
Well, that's really sad, though, like that you actually signed for another 2 years and felt that was actually something that was just so wrong for you.
And that's not a condemnation on, say, that job or that workplace. It's a statement of how I was feeling about myself at that time, because I was feeling like I was compromising myself to fit into a mold that I didn't fit, that I was in the pot and the pot was on fire. Not quite on fire enough that I was prepared to step out of the pot. I just kept turning on the aircon and hoping that the water boiled slower, putting in
Stop bubbling away.
an ice cube every now and again, distracting myself with something so that the pot didn't feel warm anymore. If you play enough games on your phone, you don't even notice the boiling pot. But when I got to that last contract negotiation, the one where the frog was done cooked.
The meat was falling off the bone, wasn't it?
I just...
fallen off into the water.
I love the heaviness of the analogies today. I think we need a greatest hits of analogies just for this episode alone. Yeah. The frog had been slow cooked all day, left on the bench top in the slow cooker, and when you got home, it just... The meat shredded and it turned into a frog fajita and
a frigida.
A frigida with mild chili cheese. a double frigida patty with mild chili cheese and a vanilla shake.
And Skittles on the side.
And shittles on the side. Because the frog had cooked, I couldn't, there was no getting my skin back. My skin was burned. I couldn't get back to room temperature. The frog was IFD, fucking done, and had the audacity to say no that time to the same agreement that left the frog running to bed crying and depressed 2 years earlier.
The frog was overdone. It had been left to baste in the same juices for too long.
The frog was asking for cold water occasionally and no one wanted to give it any more cold water.
Oh.
So the frog said, I'm fucking cooked, mate. I'm fucking cooked.
These legs were made for leaping.
Yeah.
And even though they're cooked, these legs were made for leaping. You can all go get fucked.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Now, having spent, what's it been now? What has it been now? So we're talking about that frog was cooked in August in 2020. So what's it been? Almost 2 years.
Yeah.
Do you know, it's not in this episode, so I don't, why am I even mentioning it? But, Annie Harvey, episodes and episodes ago, said to us that when she was talking about burnout in the workplace, that it takes people often up to 2 years or more to recover from true burnout.
Your 2 years is almost up.
Annie was on it. Those stats are on it, because I would say that I'm still not quite recovered from those experiences, and it's been 2 years of healing and finding out who I am, and there's still a lot of PTSD around some of those things that I get triggered by now, even though, as we've talked about in the series before, I have managed to tackle a lot of the anxiety around some of those previous concepts. I still can't hear certain music without feeling like I need to run away from it because it triggers a whole heap of memories. I've essentially wiped out the entire back catalogue of the last 50 years of what I can listen to.
Wow.
Well, except for Taylor Swift. We're never taking Taylor Swift away.
Almost predates my birth. That's a lot of music.
I know, I can't even listen to ABBA without being triggered.
No.
It's okay if it's not a radio song, it's fine. But if it's a radio song, no.
You could listen to Voyage then, because I don't know if that got any airplay at all on
I
the
could
over
listen
here.
to Voyage.
Love Voyage.
2 years on, after being a
course I
music
love
director and hearing the same songs over and over and over and over and over and over and over again for 20 years of my career, I can't listen to music anymore like that.
No, except Taylor Swift.
Yeah, like I don't mind a song that I haven't heard a billion times, but if it's a song that I've heard a lot of times, yeah, it often is still triggering. So this is two years on, I can't listen to Jimmy Barnes. 2 years on, I can't pick up a Pink album. For me,
some of those things I wouldn't be sad about, but,
Well, yeah, but for me it is sad though, because I love music. I always loved music. Music was one of those things for me that it brought me joy, and it still does. It's just I have to navigate that differently now. The point was that it's been 2 years of me trying to get my skin back to room temperature once I hopped out of the boiling water, and it's not there yet. I still got 3rd degree burns, metaphorically, on a lot of it. But, in that process, I've found out that the frog was pansexual or potsexual. Someone will think I'm being serious, and that all the anxiety wasn't all anxiety. Here's a new statement for the podcast that we haven't mentioned before. It was ADHD and neurodiversity, that I'd actually been processing the world differently to everybody else, and I didn't know. And
you're stuffing yourself into a hole that you didn't fit into.
Yeah, I was trying to fit a mold that wasn't made for me, that there are more things that I like and can enjoy than just those things, that I don't have to tie my identity to radio, that even though that was something that I once thought of as my salvation, became my focus to pull me out of a suicidal place as a goal, might have worked then, but it didn't always have to be the case. Like that power to... It wasn't radio that saved me from suicide. It was me and my own decisions in that process. I've said before that this podcast, essentially what we're doing in this business, is something that I could have seen myself starting long before I did, because these are the stories that I wanted to tell and these are the connections that I wanted to make. I wanted these authentic stories that I thought could help people. I wanted to share my truths and share other people's truths and not gloss over things anymore and not say things that I didn't believe in anymore that were because somebody else wanted me to say them. Maybe because it was never just a job to me. It was an identity. I wasn't just doing the job of a radio announcer. I was putting everything I had and was that I could display within an acceptable guideline into what I was doing, that every criticism of what I did was a criticism of me personally.
Yeah, that whole thing was conflated. Like, you were the job was you. There was no separation between that.
Yeah, and that if I wanted to continue to be that person, if I wanted to continue to do that job and get the good things from it, and there were good things, like particularly connection with people and being heard. Like, it is a whole different world to go from every time you speak having the size of Suncorp Stadium listen to you at the one time filled, to the two of us in a room in our pajamas hoping that people stream us on the internet.
Well, I'm not in my pajamas.
Sorry, some of us haven't bothered getting dressed today. And having that immediate feedback and being able to talk to people and being able to hear how something made a difference in their day. So if I'm on the radio and people call in on the phone and we have a chat about something, I can get an immediate feedback on that. How it is with social media, with podcasts, it's not immediate feedback. The only feedback I get immediately is from you. But even if what we're saying is connecting with people, I don't know it in that moment.
No, often it comes back in conversations weeks later.
Yeah. And because people don't even listen to podcasts at the same time, something that I said now 6 months ago in episode 3, it's the first time someone's heard it today. And yeah, it's that immediate feedback is something that was good that I miss, and being able to see straight away if I've made something easier for people, if I've made their day a little bit better, because it's hard to tell if you've made someone's day a little bit better when you're sitting in your pajamas in your office.
Really, I suppose it sounds like all the decisions that you were motivated to make previously were based around that identity.
Yeah. And they were
every choice you made was because you were the radio announcer.
And they were all based around what I would lose by not being that, I think. Even when I went from place to place, like from city to city, and packed up my entire life to go for a new opportunity, it was in the guise of, okay, when I get to this city and I do this job and this bigger job, then I'm on my way to finally being somebody who people will care about. Or
then I'll be good enough.
Then I'll be good enough. But there was always another job, and I was never good enough. Even if I was, didn't matter what the job was, what the city was. Even if I was the best that I could be at that thing, I wasn't good enough. There was always another job. There was always another opportunity. Even when I sat on air in the third largest city, third largest market in Australia, in a number 1 rating slot, with, I think we had the highest, I think about a cum of 523,000 people listening to me every week. Even when I was number 1 for survey after survey after survey, like we did 8 radio surveys in a year, and there was very rarely that I wasn't number 1 by, a significant amount. And when I wasn't number 1, I was mostly number 2. That wasn't enough. That wasn't validating enough. There was something else. I could be doing all those things as a job and keeping in mind that the job wasn't just a job, it was an identity, and that validation could be coming through in those results and in the feedback that I'm getting from people directly. But I still didn't think it was enough. I still thought I've failed if I can't get onto a billboard. I've failed if I can't, be on breakfast, or if I can't have a national show or whatever else, and working harder and harder and doing things in that role, because it was also never about just doing it wasn't even just about being on air. To be on air, I had to do things to justify. I was very good at what I did, and arguably 2 years on, I probably still am. I probably could. I wonder sometimes what that would be like if I'd still have it, or if now I've just learned how to say fuck a lot and talk for too long.
Oh, it's just like riding a bike, really, I think.
Until someone sticks a stick in your spokey doke.
Rips your streamers off your handlebars.
No helmet on for me.
But you were feeling like that things needed to change at the very least.
I was circling the IFD drain. And the reason that I wasn't pulling the plug on the IFD drain is because of what that would mean to me in terms of what I would lose.
It's like this, they talk about this decision-making process in the sales process, and how people kind of are unconsciously aware, or even unconsciously unaware that they need something. At that point, I think that was the very, very beginning of your decision-making process. If we look fast forward to where you are now, well, then you're at a point that is the result of having made that decision. But that decision couldn't be a quick one for you to make, unless you were like the old days, packing yourself up and moving to an even bigger and better location and opportunity. Like, that would have been a quick decision for you. But the decision you were making was quite different.
And I also didn't feel like I could at that point move to, like, I didn't think that was an option anymore. Once you get to the top of the ladder, there is no more options to just pack up and start again. And there were situations come up, and I'm obviously bound by what I can and can't mention, but there were situations come up where even in that period of time, the IFD couple of years, where the opportunity to be more, or have more audience, or be on a billboard, have a bigger show, a bigger presence, would have been enough for me to make another decision to compromise who I am, to keep to keep compromising who I was. And for circumstances out of my control, those opportunities weren't given to me. And hindsight being wonderful, I think I'm glad that they weren't, because I think it would have been worse to have an even bigger profile with an even bigger set of expectations and to be compromising even more, because that part wouldn't have changed. I wouldn't have suddenly been able to, there's no magic part, like there's no happy ending to an unhappy journey. So it wouldn't get to a magic place where, in a hypothetical world, I was the most popular, most listened to, most known person in Australian media. It wouldn't get to a point where I would be in control of who I was.
Look, I think that those types of personalities that you're talking about are towing the line with so many rules themselves anyway. Like, it looks on the outside like they are running the show,
but they're not.
But they've got stuff in their contract which would be severely limiting for them. You know, they're not living their true lives either.
So, yeah, hindsight is that had I gone further up and had the opportunities been presented to me, and had I know me, and I know that even if I was an unhappy boiling frog in a pot, that had the right opportunities been presented to me, I would have gone, it's okay, I can fucking do this anyway. And I would have sucked it down. I would have swallowed all those things that were bubbling under the surface and in the pot, and I would have said, it's okay, because I'm going to be the biggest frog in the biggest pot. And so hindsight shows me that I still would have been a fucking frog in a pot, no matter how big the fucking pot was.
You would have just extended your cooking time.
I would have been boiled dry.
Beyond tasty and not in a good way.
No amount of fajita seasoning would have fixed my frog. So, so hindsight is good like that in showing me that, but I certainly didn't feel that at the time. I really felt like I couldn't just move cities and I couldn't just go get another job, because it would all be the same. There would be no other opportunity. I was not going to be on the billboard. I was not going to be the biggest frog in the biggest pot. I didn't fit that DNA that, as much as I tried to compromise, my inner rebel frog still kept coming out enough to get in the way of those things, like I was never going to be a reality TV frog. I was never going to be a thin frog. I was never going to be a male frog. There's lots of reasons why my frog wasn't going to work, regardless of how talented the fucking frog was. The difference between the contract that I signed and cried about and the one that I didn't sign was somehow having the audacity to make a decision to say, I might not be the biggest frog in the biggest pot, but I'm a fucking valuable frog. And if you take this frog out of this pot, then what you're going to have is just garnish on a plate when you serve your meal. So if I can't be the biggest frog in the biggest pot, maybe we could put some more cool water in the pot. So, like,
sure.
Maybe we could
top up the pot a bit.
Could we just top up the pot a little bit so I don't completely boil dry? Or maybe like you could just take one leg every now and again and then like just let the other one grow back before you take that one as well. The conscious decision I made was that indecision, which is what it was the contract prior. It was indecision because I knew that the frog was being boiled alive, but I didn't know what my alternatives were because I was afraid to make a decision. So I just stuck with not making a decision, which was going along with the status quo of what was. Because even as a frog, if you speak out about the fact that your pot's on fire, then they'll tell you they'll find another frog in another pot to fill your spot. So
yeah, that's right. Well, like along all of that process though, like you were making decisions along the way, and sometimes there was those shortcut decisions, but in the bigger picture of things, you were making a very slow decision, but you were making a decision nonetheless.
A slow boil decision.
Yeah. I mean, like sometimes when we're not quickly making a decision, it can feel like, certainly we can be accused of not making a decision.
Yeah. So was I just collecting more data?
Well, it's like me when I'm saying I'm throwing the stick in the cog, that I need to kind of just stop everything so I can give myself space to sort out what I want. Similarly with you as the frog in that pot, you were there needing to formulate a decision. You needed to actually make a decision that counted rather than just make a decision. A decision that relied on shortcuts just to make other people happy or just to kind of restore the status quo, because that would have just been a reactive response to, oh, well, this is as good as it gets. So I'm not going to rock the boat here. I'm not going to kind of rock this pan too much because it might tip off the stove. No, you thought, fuck it, tip it off in the end. But that was a very slow burn.
Hindsight is seeing that having space has helped me with the decisions around stuff and understanding, my neural pathways and why I've been and done and do things the way that I do. So it's like if we give ourselves enough space, we can see those habits that we didn't previously recognize and those shortcuts that we'd normally rely on, that we don't want to rely on anymore.
And Joe Forgas spoke to us about how we create those shortcuts, which can sometimes be beneficial.
If we're making these shortcuts in our thinking, can we create shortcuts that are beneficial to us instead?
That's a very good question, but, how do you influence the content of somebody else's mind? In other words, how do you? In a sense, I suppose, when I'm thinking about it, you are right. You can do that by educating people and establishing cultural norms which embody those shortcuts. But it has to be taught. And in a sense, if you think about the amazing success of liberal democracies over the past 300 years, it's because we have internalized some of those shortcuts.
We're doing this every day, aren't we? We're identifying people and discriminating against them based on our preconceived notions of them without getting to know them.
Unfortunately, I have to say, yes, that is true. In other words, stereotyping, categorizing is another example of this evolutionary universal tendency that all humans have. The human mind basically works not by looking at each instance of an experience as unique, but automatically classifying it. And we do it with people. And yes, there is lots of evidence, somebody has an accent or somebody has a different skin color, then we automatically make an association between what we observe and that. And the way to deal with it is essentially try to learn or teach people in the educational system that these expectations should never be applied to actual individuals you encounter because they are all unique. The best information we get about people is the individual in front of us. If you're relying on your pre-existing stereotypes, you're not going to make a good decision. And that can be learned and can even be sanctioned. So obviously discrimination based on racial or stereotype characteristics should be punished. It's totally unacceptable. But I'm not sure we can do very much at all about the automatic cognitive tendency for people to think that way.
Mirren also makes an interesting observation about shortcutting decisions with music.
One of the things I was thinking about with music then is that sometimes a song can kind of act as a shortcut, I suppose, and maybe that's a shortcut in the brain as well with a new neural pathway. So I'm wondering if could we consciously create those? You hear a song, it instantly reminds you of that time that you felt good getting married. Could we consciously try and associate one type of cue to elicit that response?
It's definitely possible. And there's a large literature on this idea of conditioning, where you gradually pair one stimulus with another outcome or response, so that over time it becomes a sort of an automatic or reflexive response. Whether we could actually consciously do this and then make sure that our response was the same every time, I'm not so sure, because people change and, our feelings change from one moment to the next. And we might hear, the wedding song on one day, but be in a particularly bad mood with your spouse and then think, oh God, I can't believe I loved dancing to this. We're so variable that it's very hard to predict, hard and fast kind of set of rules that we could roll out across all contexts. And I think that's one of the great things about studying, human cognition, is that there's so many different variables that go into the mix and can change. And we change over time as well. That if it was as easy as just, if we press play, then this will elicit this response, we'd be kind of reduced back to almost Pavlovian dogs, just salivating at the bell. But, we're far more complex than that.
Every time I hear Gangnam Style, though, it tastes like sushi because of the amount of times I watched the music video while I was eating sushi for lunch.
That's great conditioning there.
I am Pavlovian.
Yeah. I think we all are in a sense, because, there are there are certain conditioned responses that we all seem to display. And that's, one of them is a conditioned taste aversion. So if you've ever been sick after a certain type of food and you have this complete aversion to that, it can be a lifelong absolute, aversion to a certain type. So for me, I had food poisoning and now I cannot eat mushrooms. And that's just it. Yeah. We will never have a good relationship because I just cannot do it. And as a vegetarian, it's very limiting. So
I think on the music front, I jump immediately to the supermarket because it's always been a chore. But I'm now at that age when the music they're playing is actually stuff I'll sing along to. So it's becoming something I look forward to. Is that them using that to their advantage? Am I being a victim of their manipulative music games?
Maybe you've entered into their target age group, I don't know. I think there's probably a lot of, they're trying to pick music that's not overly arousing, but that most people will enjoy and most people will resonate with. And it's all sort of, I guess, averaging out based on what the average enjoyable song is and what's the, least distracting, but most sort of enjoyable songs that we can play. But yeah, it's, I often do question the choice of music that's played in supermarkets because it seems to be an interesting mix.
Well, that kind of sounds like a whole topic and episode of its own, doesn't it?
It sure does. So look, let's put a pin in that because with all of this talk about shortcutting decisions, ow, that was a thumbtack. It's also important to consider the value of the lost art of critical thinking.
As an academic talking to a non-academic, how would you teach me to be a better critical thinker?
There's many ways of doing it. It goes back to Socrates, the Socratic method. You ask questions. Do you really believe that? Why do you believe that? Asking people to explain, asking people to, very oftentimes people don't know why they believe something. They never thought about it. They heard it and they accept it. Asking yourself, why do I believe this, is a good way to actually learn. The human mind is essentially a very imperfect instrument for detecting reality. People are not very good in understanding statistics. If you tell them an anecdote, it's much more powerful of a single person than telling them statistics. So to question your beliefs is a very good way to do it. And there are many methods. It's not just the Socratic method. Science, learning science, teaching psychology is a very, very good way to question what you think you already believe and finding out whether it's really true or not. And unfortunately, the uncomfortable truth at the end of it is that most of the things are not true or not completely true, are only true for a time. So you have to live in a world of considerable uncertainty. And accepting that is very important. Absolute truth are very few and far between, even in physics. The world is far too complex and multiple determined, and there are multiple causations. So simple truth are almost always wrong. And you can teach that, you can learn that. I think the education system has a very important role to play in that.
Murray Thiessen, AC, Director of the Matilda Centre for Research in Mental Health and Substance Use, prompted us to consider the possibility of failure along the way and how we allow that to affect us in terms of life-altering decisions related to ending addiction, for example.
You hear stories of people, they say, I went cold turkey on something. I was able to give it up overnight and I never thought about it again. But I'm wondering if you think it really exists or if cold turkey is really just that kind of final manifestation of a whole series of other decisions that we've made along the way that maybe weren't so conscious.
Yeah, it's really, really, really interesting question, and it's a very interesting issue to think through because, some people can do that. They can say, tomorrow I'm never eating a chocolate bar ever again. And it happens. They don't. We do have in our research knowledge of people who have decided tomorrow I'm not smoking and they stop smoking. But it's still more the exception than the rule. And it's still, for most people, it will take effort and it will take time to change those behaviours.
We were chatting to a successful CEO yesterday, and he was asked that when it comes to building the company and doing, striving for his goals, he doesn't actually make failure an option. Is that feasible?
So he's coming from a CEO perspective. So I suppose it depends on your expectations. If the question is it possible to not have failures, that failure isn't an option? I come both from a research perspective, and I come at this also from human behavior and addiction. And for me, taking that context, failure, we have to learn from failure in research. We have to, and we also, in a sense, in addiction, it's learning from failure where we've failed or haven't been able to change the behavior that we want to change. It's a different thing to say failure isn't acceptable. I'm not even going to allow failure, to I'll learn from that failure, but then I'll throw it away because it's not going to define how I will interact with the world in the future. It won't define for me as a researcher whether I'll try something new again, because research is about taking a bit of risk, trying things that are new. If I fail once, it's not going to stop me from trying again. If I fail once with changing my behavior, it's not going to stop me from trying again.
I've been considering failure. That's why my nose sounds all stuffy. My edited out personal breakdown in the middle of a podcast.
Not coming to a Patreon near you?
Oh, and it might come to Patreon.
Yeah, it might come to Patreon.
I tell you what, if you subscribe, I'll put up part of my emotional breakdown in the middle of this podcast behind the paywall.
There you go. What better offer could you possibly want?
No better
Patreon.com. Reframe of mind. But Marie talks about these points of indecision, right?
Mm.
And for a long time, I toed and froed over a house that I had, didn't I? I had an investment property, and I can say had because obviously I got through this, which is part of this story, but I had this long-held indecision about acting on selling the property.
Yeah.
Because while I knew that I'd never return to it to live, I still held on to it for over 10 years because of an emotional attachment. Sure, it was increasing in value, but to what end? I haven't got any kids to leave it to, which is the general flow of how wealth accumulation is viewed in my family. You get the assets, you die, and you leave it all to the kids, and then they can go off and live a happy life. Well, at this point of the story of this arc, which is Reframe of Mind Season 1, I'm starting to feel inspired a little bit to let go of it, more than ever, because, you were talking earlier about how over a period of 3 to 4 years, you were percolating this idea that really you wanted something different. And for me, this idea was germinating for quite a while that maybe I don't need the house anymore. Maybe I need to let it go.
Is this the equivalent of the frog trying to sell the pot it's in?
Probably. The frog going to market.
The pot's accumulated value since it's been boiling.
Have I got some water for you?
It features a swimming pool, so that's going.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It might be a bit warm, but hey.
It's heated. It's a heated pool.
Perfect for winter.
Mm.
So, rather than getting to the point of thinking I'm just over it, I had to start thinking about what selling the property could mean for me, like for my security in the present, but also other things that would mean as well. So made the choice to sell.
Mm.
And you were there with me when I was making those decisions and having those sort of big quandaries of should I, shouldn't I, and all that kind of stuff. And because it was more than just selling a property,
It's the emotion behind it, because that was the house that you bought with that ex-partner.
Yeah, it was. So that house represented all of those dreams that were connected to it.
Mm.
That house was visited by my mum and my dad.
Yeah.
We'd spent time together in that house. And yet now it basically just represented dreams that were never going to materialize, even the ones not related to that previous relationship. I had these lofty dreams of one day being able to, have this holiday house available for me and for the family and friends to use as a little holiday escape. But, the reality is, and here's the harsh reality of it.
Life's not a Hollywood ending? Well,
it's not. If they couldn't be bothered visiting me while I was living there, why would I think they'd appreciate having it available to them? It just wasn't going to happen, why would they? So I moved through my stages of anger, and then I could just have a really good, sincere look at myself and decide what was best for me. I'm 50. I made a decision that time ago to actually invest and to keep it there as an investment. But I needed to stop living my life like I was trying to please an imaginary bunch of people or audience to gain good ratings.
Huh.
That whole fantasy of hanging onto it until it's worth $1 billion and then, buying everybody a house or whatever, why? I needed to really think about the real reasons why I had it.
Do we have main character syndrome or something? Like
maybe we do.
Because I think it's not the house for me, but all that stuff we've been talking about. It's I'm the main character in the film, and
you're the hero.
I'm the protagonist. I'm the hero in my story, and not being able to have the hero's ending that I expected.
Or will you? It's longer than a 2-hour film, like features. Okay,
it's definitely it's the Zack Snyder cut of my life that goes for.
I know, right? I was just about to go there. 6 hours worth. 6 fucking hours,
and it wasn't any better than the edit.
It was no fucking better.
All
Seriously.
it was just a commitment. It was a commitment.
It benefited from having that extra 4 hours chopped out of it. On the original release.
So it's just the director's cut.
It is.
But if we're the heroes of our own story, when we get the main character syndrome, what happens if it's, if it doesn't have a happy ending? Like it's also not the, what was that one? The Exotic Marigold Hotel where that.
I love that film. It's a great.
I
film.
know. And it had that beautiful line in it, which is like, if the ending's not happy, then the story's not finished yet. Or something like that. It was, and that's beautiful in film.
It is beautiful in film.
But sometimes the ending's not happy.
It does make me think, though. With all of these shortcut decisions that we make, and all of the decisions we make because we think we have to. Like, what if we just made a decision that made us happy?
Are we doing everything in service of a happy Hollywood ending to our main character story?
I think Joe Forgas might have something to add to that.
Is everything that we do, every decision that we make, small ones, big ones, everything in between, is it all just geared at us trying to find whichever one we think is going to make us happy?
That's a difficult one, because sometimes you make decisions to make somebody else happy. Sometimes we make decisions to make our children happy, or our relatives, or a friend. So, I think there is always some calculation about future outcomes. But I think it's very difficult to measure, because it's often also dependent on your particular value system. Sometimes you do something because it will make you feel good about yourself. Sometimes altruism or charity or empathy seems to be helping another person, but it also helps you to feel good about yourself. So unfortunately, the answer is often that we're really not very good in knowing all of that.
We're good at making decisions about what we want to eat for breakfast, but we're not so great at making decisions about whether we should leave our job or not. Is there a way to bring them back to the same level? Because we don't really care if we mess up the breakfast once. We can just have another one tomorrow.
Yes, of course. Some decisions are much more important than others. And usually it's the decisions which are much more important where there is a lot more uncertainty. If you leave your job, you really can't tell what other job you find. I mean, typically people make those sorts of decisions once they have more information. You won't leave your job until you have a better one. You don't leave your spouse until you have a better one. I mean, people typically hedge their bets and try to get more information. You very rarely jump into the unknown if you can help it. And that's kind of rational, really, isn't it?
What's in your personal toolkit, Joe? Are you happy?
Most of the time, probably not.
But you're very effective in decision making, I'll bet.
Not really. I'm trying to do my best. But also, I mean, what we spoke about before, that being an individual and taking on all these responsibilities and trying to do it rationally is tiresome. And in a way, thinking a lot is not a good way to become more happy. It's the load of individuality, the demands of trying to be a responsible individual. It does make life in a way difficult. And I think most people, myself included, ask many of the big questions to which we have no answer. What's the meaning of life? Why am I here? What have I done? what's waiting for me. I mean, most thinking people are bothered by that, and there is never an answer to it unless you happen to be religious, which I'm not.
But it's true, though. Like, we make all of these decisions with imaginary people looking on. But
yeah, but the real audience, the real people out there, they don't give a fuck what we're doing. They're the main characters of their own story. They're on their own hero's journey. Like someone who's the villain in my story isn't the villain in theirs. I'm the villain in theirs.
Oh boy, am I a villain in some people's story.
Oh, I'm a fucking arch villain in some. I'm a super villain.
Oh my God, you are. Yes.
Wait, in whose story? Who was I a super villain to that you're thinking of?
I'm thinking of
Oh, I am the supervillain in his story.
Yeah.
And the moral of the story is we're all a villain to somebody.
That's right.
So, well, two morals of the story then today. Everyone is a villain in someone's story, and also thinking is tiresome, and asking big questions that have no answer causes nothing but breakdowns in the middle of podcasts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
So next time,
I think we should loosen things up a little bit. I think we could probably take a bit of a break.
Do you think I should actually edit any of the breakdown into the episode? Like maybe a little bit of it for context.
See how you feel about it.
If you can't use your breakdowns for content, then what's the point of them?
As Carrie Fisher would say, take your broken heart and turn it into art. And she said it just like that too.
Next time on Reframe of Mind, should we loosen up a little bit?
I think that might be a nice thing to do.
No breakdowns in the middle of the next episode. We promise?
I never make promises I can't keep, but I do think that we can take a little sidestep and make a little sidebar episode because we spoke a little bit earlier about that thought bubble we had about an episode dedicated to the influence of music on us.
It's the pin. Hang on, let me get the pin out. What sound does a pin make when you're taking it out of a corkboard?
I don't know.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't.
But that doesn't translate very well for podcasts, so.
True. Yeah.
Just visualize a big red pin coming out of a corkboard.
Everything coming undone around this idea around the influence of music on us. Our very own music special that doesn't contain music.
Because it's triggering.
And also, of course, there's copyright money. But
yes, we have some fascinating insights on music and mental health and the brain from Professor Bill Thompson, Director of the Music, Sound and Performance Lab for the Department of Psychology at Macquarie University.
One of the responses that we got from fans of extreme metal music was, duh, we like it because, we like it. And what did you expect? That we would end up, feeling terrible? Of course we feel empowered. We feel joyful. We enjoy this music.
You've been hearing our story, and now we really want to hear yours.
Connect with @Reframe of Mind on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and Twitter.
Or connect with @Welcome Change Media on LinkedIn.
You can also contact us via reframeofmind.com.au with your stories or suggestions for future topics.
We'd like to thank today's guests for sharing their personal stories and insights. For more information on any of the subjects, guests, or references used in this episode, please see our show notes or reframeofmind.com.au.
Reframe of Mind is a Welcome Change Media production.
Actually, it makes total sense now to get into a music episode, especially if I leave in that part about music being fucking triggering.
Yes.
It's like, how is my pain so brilliant?
Well done.
When
she suffers for her art.
Ages ago, and you said that thing about your process of scripting and how you're like, I'm going to write a letter of how my life is going to be and what it feels like at that time. Do you think that when we scripted these storyboards at the end of last year, we scripted this whole experience? And side note, if we did that, could we have not scripted some more good things to go with it?
Yes and yes.
Can you just check the storyboards? Did we script in a happy ending?
What constitutes a happy ending?
About $50 at the massage parlour.
Wow, where are you going?